Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. So today, the three of us, I'm going to introduce ourselves. We're going to be talking about a project that we worked on for several years. It's this book entitled Expanding Field of Architecture, Women in Practice Across the Globe. We're going to briefly be looking at 9 of the projects that are included in the book. And we're going to be reading excerpts of the book, also to keep the pace and the time. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about a few remarkable projects celebrating women's contributions to the built environment. I'm joined by Marcia Feuerstein, professor of architecture. She's faculty at the WAC, the Washington Alexandria Architecture Center in DC, and Jodi La Coe, who teaches at Marywood University and who came today with a group of Marywood students. Woo! Thank you for coming. I believe there may also be students from Hollins. No.
No. Oh.
Boo. Okay, that's fine. So, beginning in 2016, we envisioned a book that would be a collection of 40 projects that happened to be designed by women. Although simply stated, the situation proved to be more complex than anticipated due to the collaborative nature of creative practice itself. And like in popular culture portrayals, there is no single visionary who is solely responsible for architectural projects. Architecture is created by teams of architects, designers, engineers, and contractors, as well as clients, accountants, lawyers, and communities. Every architectural practice is modeled on collaboration, whether it is a small firm consulting with other companies or large firms with in-house interdisciplinary teams.
While women have joined the profession in larger numbers in the last 2 decades, they account for less than 1/4 of registered architects in the United States of America. Elsewhere in the world and in leadership positions, these numbers are even lower. According to a survey of the top 100 international architecture firms published by DZine in 2017, only 1 in 10 of top leadership positions are held by women. Danish architect Dorte Mandrup described these findings as quite shocking, adding that, quote, "It's interesting too that there seemed to be practically no woman holding creative director or lead designer positions, and that the women that are at top positions have administrative or CEO roles backing up a male star."
While a number of women in architecture is proving it's far from equal, and prejudice still finds their way into the commissions, awards, and public recognition. In the field of architecture, recognition, credit, and attribution in the press, publications, and awards has traditionally stemmed from the idea that of the sole visionary, the modern master architect. This situation is eloquently described by Italian architect Doriana Mandrelli Fuxas, founder of Studio Fuxas with her husband Massimiliano, when she states, "We work together and we sign our names together on projects, but often in the end, my name doesn't appear. Even when I was 90% responsible for the projects, when 2 individuals work on a project and one of them is well known, that's enough for people. 2 people is 1 too many."
This erasure is most evident in the controversy surrounding the highest awards in the field of architecture, the Pritzker Architecture Prize, awarded annually to honor a living architect or architects whose built work demonstrates a combination of those qualities of talent, vision, and commitment, which has produced consistent and significant contributions to humanity and the built environment through the art of architecture. First awarded in 1979, it wasn't until 2001, 22 years later, that this award transitioned from recognizing one person to embracing partnerships with laureates Jacques Herzog and Pierre de Meuron. A decade earlier, the idea of awarding partners was rejected when Robert Venturi received the Pritzker Award without his partner, Denise Scott Brown, although the two practice professionally and collaboratively since 1967. Ironically, 2 years before Venturi became a laureate, Scott Brown published her influential essay, Room at the Top, Sexism and the Star System in Architecture, in which she criticized the range and role of sexism in the attribution of her work to her partner alone.
In 2004, Iraqi-born architect Zaha Hadid was the first woman to win the Pritzker Prize, and she remains the only sole female recipient. Radical and theoretical, Hadid's position within a cult of egoistic personalities was defined by the critics as idiosyncratic, since, as Scott Brown noted, quote, the architectural prima donnas are all male. While the quality of Hadid's work was recognized by her male peers, her penchant for curvilinear forms was generally interpreted as female, as she was dubbed Queen of the Curve by the Guardian critic Rowan Moore. Underlining this point, a little over 1 month later, critic Oliver Wainwright's headline in The Guardian read, Zaha Hadid, sports stadiums, too big, too expensive, and too much like a vagina.
Seeking to avoid similar stereotypes, Mandrup, sorry, I just got stuck here. Mandrup stated definitely in response again to the 2017 Dazine survey that, quote, I am not a female architect, I am an architect, end quote, decrying the lists that she believes place women in tenuous positions as other, somehow different from their male counterparts. Admittedly, Mandrup is neither wrong nor alone in this sentiment, and she has refused to have her work in books and articles that call out women designers, including this particular book, although later on her work was included in other books of this kind. However, unless the contributions of women are explicitly recognized, great architecture is generally assumed by critics and the public alike to have been designed by men.
Our intention in writing this book is to recognize that the greatness of the work itself and of those who contributed to the work. We selected projects across the globe to reveal the abundant and diverse built work led in myriad ways by women architects and designers without dwelling on the fact of female or of the feminine. Just as for centuries, similar books contain projects that happen to have been designed by men, we hold the position that this is a collection of 40 projects that happen to have been designed by women, albeit collaboratively. Through our conversations with the designers, we were able to demonstrate unique qualities of their works that reveal their design intentions, which are evident in the beauty of the projects themselves. Through this range, 9 of which we chose for today, we hope to recognize the diverse roles of women architects and designers in producing great buildings and to contribute to the global effort of normalizing women in leadership roles in the expanding field of architecture.
So we're going to start now with the 9 case studies. The first one is the Elena Garro Cultural Center in Coyoacán, Mexico, by Fernanda Canales Arquitectura, together with Arquitectura 911. The municipality of Coyoacán in the southern area of Mexico City can be distinguished for its complex history since its settlement around the 11th century. The birthplace of artist Frida Kahlo, Coyoacán maintains, in spite of its vibrant cultural activity, an intimate scale of 2-story single-family homes built between the 16th and the 20th century. The dense urban fabric is defined by narrow cobblestone roads and small plazas filled with mature trees, urban remnants of the colonial period. The Elena Garro Cultural Center is named after Elena Garro, a prolific Mexican screenwriter, journalist, playwright, storyteller, novelist, and activist of the early 20th century, and is situated in a neighborhood long considered an artist's enclave. In this historical context, the project repurposes an existing mansion built at the turn of the century, the early 20th century, and expands it to house a bookstore, classrooms, a multipurpose auditorium, an outdoor forum, a cafeteria, and offices. Embedded in a dense urban 2-story neighborhood where the public space of the street is firmly held by the continuous facade of the city block built on the property line, the project elects to recede from the street to create a public pocket, a moment of arrival. A raised landscape shifts the points of entrance, now originating at the corners of the property, rather than on the central axis of the lot, offering deeper perspectives and allowing a longer and slower sequence of arrival and entrance via a ramp. The project occupies, in addition to the existing mansion, the front yard and the backyard. The double-height volume added in front of the mansion is conceived as an urban-scale vitrine, allowing the books to spill out toward the street. The volume at the back, housing the cultural center activities, occupies the full width of the lot, giving the outdoor spaces a finished form. The simple and neutral materials introduced are left exposed in honest expression and in deference to the mansion. In addition to displaying the books, the urban vitrine frames the front facade of the existing mansion with its theatrical balcony projecting over the porch into the center of the new volume, and encases the front yard with its already existing vegetation and mature trees. Like a glove turned inside out, the front volume frames and exhibits the mansion as an historic artifact, inviting the visitor to inhabit and experience it, now with raised awareness, from multiple perspectives. With its double-height glass facade, the urban vitrine draws the public space and landscape of the street in, while the roof aperture captures the sky to offer it to the mature trees growing with it. Through it. Referencing the small urban patios and courtyards typical of this area, the expansion acts as an instrument that mediates the landscape, delineating outdoor spaces, providing buffer spaces and small courtyards, and employing subtle reveals that, without crowding the mansion, gently invite it to contribute to the overall experience. Contiguous to the café, a courtyard offers a contained, quiet outdoor space that acts as a transition between the bookstore and the lively outdoor forum and gardens. In the density of the urban context and the constraining limits of the lot, the design, tripling its original built volume, successfully conveys expansiveness by formalizing the exterior, incorporating gardens, courtyards, and a roof garden, making room for spaces of contemplation, learning, and discourse, a fitting homage to Elena Garro.
Moving on to the next project. The Writers' Theater was founded in Glencoe in 1992, with a special emphasis on exploring the power of the written word within the intimacy of theater. From its origins in the small back room of a local bookstore, a close relationship between the actors and their audience became a hallmark of this critically acclaimed company. In 2016, the Writers' Theater welcomed audiences to its new multi-theater complex designed by Studio Gang on the former site of the Women's Library Club of Glencoe. Although located on the Metro Regional Rail Line north of Chicago, the Forest Preserve area of Cook County has provided a natural barrier to the sprawling development of Chicago, preserving a small-town atmosphere. The Writers' Theater and the Women's Library Club share this new building on Tudor Court, a commercial street with small restaurants and cafes between a contained civic and retail core and large historic houses with ample front lawns on mature tree-lined streets. On either side of the theater, there are two park spaces, an informal grove of trees on the east side, creating a visual and acoustic barrier to buffer the vehicles on Green Bay Road and the Metro tracks beyond, and Friends Park to the west, which faces Vernon Avenue and includes a children's playground. Within this context, the design for the Writers' Theater opens itself up to the surrounding parks and street life, a goal that Jeannie Gang linked to her desire to explore the, quote, connection between theater and urban life. The choice to wrap the two formal theater spaces, a 250-seat thrust stage and a 99-seat black box with light-filled, visually permeable spaces, allows the company to integrate itself into the life of the village, inviting curiosity from children and from passersby. Highly visible due to its glass facade facing Tudor Court and the adjacent grove of trees, the lobby serves as a third informal performance or presentation space that is used both by the theater and by the community at large. In pleasant weather, two of the large glass panels facing onto the grove that can be opened, extending the lobby into the park and thereby fulfilling its relationship with urban life. This sense of permeability is heightened by the upper-level open-air gallery walk that overlooks the lobby, the park, the street, and the pedestrian spaces below. Maintaining the sense of openness and permeability between the building and its surroundings, 4 large timber trusses are supported on 4 columns, allowing for an open floor plan. The coffered roof framing, also made of laminated timber, sits atop the trusses. The gallery walk is suspended from this primary structure. Its timber lattice is physically and visually light, akin to the branches of the tree canopy beyond, and in contrast to the great trusses. Composed of thin battens of Port Orford cedar, prized by native tribes in the Pacific Northwest to create stiff and straight arrow shafts, this seemingly delicate screen is actually a robust structural system that carries the walkway in tension. The battens meet the lower beams via a connection that leverages the natural strength and flexibility of wood. Each batten is splayed and shimmed into a flared cat's paw that slots and locks into the matching pocket cut into the beam. From the vantage point of this timber perch, patrons are immersed both in the surrounding tree canopy and the urban vitality of the theater and street life below. And now we move to Morocco. At the end of the 8th century, Idris I founded Madinat Fas, on the right bank of the Fez River within the far Maghreb region of North Africa in what is today within the Kingdom of Morocco. According to legend, Idris created the lines of the city using a golden pickaxe, or fas, presumably tracing the first perimeter walls, principal streets, and the river-fed canal system that are similar to the canals of his homeland in Baghdad, providing both fresh water and waste removal. 2 decades later, his son Idris II founded a separate settlement named Al-Aliya on the left bank of the Fez River, populated by refugees from Al-Karawan, now in the Republic of Tunisia. In the middle of the 9th century, daughters of Al-Karawan refugee Mohammed al-Fihri used their inheritance to build mosques on either side of the Fez. In Al-Aliya, Fatima funded and oversaw the construction of the Mosque of the Karawin herself, which eventually became the University of Al-Karawin in 1963. Today, the Al-Fihri mosques stand among the few remaining examples of Idrisid architecture in the pedestrian-only streets of the Medina de Fez. 200 years after the founding of these 2 settlements, the Almoravids greatly expanded and strengthened the existing canal system, providing fresh water to every important building, such as the Al-Fihri mosques, and many residences as well. However, after centuries of excessive pollution, the river canal system had become a sewer, almost entirely buried below ground. Previously praised as the River of Jewels, the main canal of the Fez River, geographically the lowest point in the old city, became known as the River of Trash until a separate sewer system was constructed in 2007. With these measures in place, Aziza Chaouni and Takako Tajima, partners in Bureau East, proposed to uncover the main channel and excavate the riverbed to create the riparian wetlands of the Fez, also establishing several new public plazas, providing relief for the congested streets. The Mosque of the Al-Karawin has been renovated many times and expanded to encompass half a hectare, reportedly once capable of sheltering 20,000 worshipers in its Hippo-style prayer hall. In 1349, a formal reading room for the Al-Karawin Library was constructed in the northeast corner of the mosque, and another reading room was later constructed south of the main prayer hall, accessed through a small door to the east of the mihrab, a semicircular niche in the Qibla wall used to orient worshippers in the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. A 20th century renovation and expansion of the library now houses around 24,000 books, 6,000 lithographs, and over 4,000 manuscripts held between a set of copper-covered timber doors with 4 separate locks opened by 4 keys, each held by a different person. In 2012, Aziza Chaouni Projects was selected to rehabilitate the library with 3 related objectives: to maintain the archival quality of interior temperature and humidity levels powered by on-site renewable energy resources, to provide a scientific laboratory for the preservation and digitization of the fragile manuscripts and printed books, and to display these treasures to the general public. Alleviating an unpleasant and destructive dampness, Chaouni created a new canal system, repairing and replacing the broken clay pipes that allowed rainwater and the Oued Fez to freely flow between the library rooms. Beneath the library rooms. With a functioning drainage system in place, constant year-round temperature and humidity levels in the manuscript rooms were ensured with the aid of air conditioning units hidden behind new hand-carved wooden screens created by local artisans and powered by discreetly positioned photovoltaic panels. This space below the main reading room was transformed into a state-of-the-art laboratory to preserve and digitally photograph these fragile artifacts. Opening the incredible cultural resource to the public was personal to Chaouni, who, as a child growing up in Fez, recalls stories of her great-grandfather finding respite in the secluded library while attending the university. A new courtyard cafe, seen here, a manuscript exhibition room, and a small museum now welcome and sustain the curiosity of all guests. These measures serve to protect and restore both the architecture and the content of the library for current and future generations who seek to understand the history of the Maghreb.
Okay, now we're going to move to Spain. We're going to look at the Caixa Forum Museum, Auditorium, and Cultural Center in Zaragoza, Spain, by Estudio Carme Pinos. Located on the former site of the railway station El Portillo and bordering the walled old city center of Zaragoza, the building anchors a large vacated piece of land newly designated by the city council as an urban park. In close proximity to Portillo's gate into the medieval city, the project becomes a landmark in the company of, among others, the bullring Plaza de Toros de la Misericordia, built in the late 1700s, and the Aljaferia Palace, currently the seat of parliament, and one of the few remaining examples of Aragonese Mudéjar art, built in the 11th century and protected by UNESCO. In response, the architecture is conceived as an object building, easily distinguishing itself with its sculptural form and scale, and clearly marking the entrance to the park. Based on a simple symmetrical diagram composed of 2 dissimilar squares intersecting diagonally, the volumetric organization of the architecture is easily read and comprehended in the cityscape. However, this diagonal shift and openness produce an unexpected spatial complexity that invites exploration and enriches the visitor's experience. The 2 large-scale volumes are lifted and cantilever out into the public space from a central support, composed of 2 robust black concrete walls supporting opposite corners of the intersecting volumes. Reaching up with a desire to contribute to the city skyline, the architecture performs as a flowing vertical city walk. The civic program includes an auditorium below ground, 3 exhibit halls, multipurpose rooms, and workshops above ground in the cantilevering masses, and a cafe restaurant on the rooftop. The architecture affords not only a continuous and fluid experience through its interior space, but also multiple opportunities along the way to reconnect with the city. Thriving in the semi-arid climate, the large screen-clad volumes lift to create generous covered public spaces below. Visitors exiting the exhibit halls at different levels encounter views toward the city framed by these volumes and protected from glare. At the top, the roof of the hall offers an extensive terrace from which to enjoy the views of the meandering Ebro River and long vistas of the city. The covered public plaza to the south, below the largest volume, is 3 stories tall and is populated by smaller, sensuous architectural fragments that acknowledge the human scale and invite visitors to use the space. Experienced simultaneously from multiple levels, the shaded plaza follows a design that turns the main entrance area into a multi-story park, a lively outdoor event space. The double-skin metal facade wraps the volumes like a fabric on all exposed faces, both vertical and horizontal, strengthening the reading of the lifted masses and formalizing the finished ceiling of the public space below them. The modular skin conceals the interior except for the 2 pair of large-scale openings converging each at the outermost edges of the volumes, conferring on them the appearance of cubist faces scanning the horizon. Their elevation allows for broader vistas of the city over the open park and toward the main street. Mostly of aluminum, the double skin also incorporates translucent polycarbonate shapes that allow blue LED luminaries installed in the cavity to shine through, turning the volumes into lanterns that illuminate and activate the public space below. This building has been recognized for its sustainability. It has also been lauded for what it offers the city for its public spaces, as expressed by the architect, quote, spaces which allows for an urban coexistence with the building where creativity and cultural gatherings in a broad and democratic sense are possible.
So now we're moving to Budapest. And designed by O'Donnell and Toomey, the Central European University in Budapest, the CEU itself was first imagined in 1989 with the fall of the Berlin Wall and communism, but officially was founded as an international university in 1991 when the Eastern Bloc transformed to democracies and open societies with George Soros. Their master plan consolidated a group of existing historic adjacent university buildings to create an academic community that engendered engagement and interaction according to CEU's principles of openness and permeability. The campus connects to its neighborhood, the river, and the city at large. Academic clusters were interspersed with a series of covered yet open courtyards and internal streets, quote, interweaving the buildings with new and existing public spaces, a characteristic of Budapest's rich and dense urban context. After the first phase of the master plan was completed, the red, the campus was inaugurated with plans to complete the master plan. It was closed in 2019 by Viktor Orban, Hungary's far-right prime minister. The original campus, part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site in central Budapest with the 5 separate historic buildings, are now connected by a new hidden architectural spine made up of pedestrian streets, courtyards, and atriums, which once inserted created a new building on Nadar Utka. That's only phase 1, which was completed. The rest has never been completed. The new building included access to a new library, learning commons, multi-purpose auditorium, conference facilities, a new business school, and teaching spaces. A true infill, the spine unfolds as a series of sequential, interlocked, multi-story spaces. Voids open to views from the library into the atrium, from the top of the stairs out to the sky and roof gardens, promoting gathering within the climate-controlled space and protection from Budapest's harsh winters. Quote, courtyards are the campus, its circulation system, and social space, said the architects. Flying staircases, elegant steel sculptural elements within these spaces are connective wayfinding devices that create social spaces while encouraging interaction and collaboration between academic departments, unquote. The sequencing, transitions, and wayfinding events within the new public street and courtyards are framed by these inserted stairs that vertically connect the complex while offering views up to the roof garden sky and across the entire building, imparting a sense of lightness throughout the connected open forum spaces. The roof garden straddles the buildings, providing views over the city's skyline. Gardens are densely landscaped, creating environmental and sustainable models for the city, supporting native species, pollinators, and other natural environmental processes with a community garden, green walls and roofs, trellises, and spaces for study, yoga, films, concerts, socializing, and education. Rainwater collection supplies, the drip irrigation system, water-efficient toilets, and faucets. The gardens reduce heat gain, filter air, and create shade to the interior courtyards. CEU Nador 15's new facade and main entrance is located on axis with the Danube River, intersecting with the larger city, inviting citizens and students to enter, use the library and cafe. The entrance also establishes an exterior public gathering space on the street. As the first contemporary construction to be built within this historically protected area, it was designed to maintain the street edge, address the existing scale and proportional system of neighboring facades, and retain the existing plot size and building heights. Facade study models and watercolors explored architectural integrity of the street along Nador while facing towards the Danube, framed by the buildings along, and I'm gonna completely destroy this word, this name, the Yazo Ferenc Utka. Clad in local limestone used throughout the city, it contrasts with neighboring facades while alluding to the city's historic stone architecture. The geometric and cubic facades are solid yet open. Internal public spaces are fabricated with stone, timber, concrete, and steel. The new construction seamlessly fits within the existing historic fabric while retaining its contemporary presence.
So continuing our trip across the globe, we're now in Denmark. Established in the early 8th century on the west coast of southern Jylland, Ribe was an important medieval Danish trading town along the Ribe River, which flows westerly into the frigid waters of the North Sea. In excavations completed by Southwest Jutland Museums in 2012, across the plaza from Ribe's main cathedral, a brick ruin of a 12th century monastery was discovered under more than 70 Christian Viking graves in a cemetery believed to have been established by Ansgar, the 9th century Archbishop of Hamburg-Bremen. Originally, Ansgar's church and cemetery were established away from the city center, positioned south of the river, but over time, and with the erection of the cathedral, the plaza became a very important public place on which other civic structures were built. Originally built on top of the cemetery, the south and east wings of the procession hall were demolished in 1738 to supply bricks for the rebuilding of and expansion of the cathedral. The remaining north wing was kept and served many functions over the years, related and unrelated to the church. Today, the hall provides access to the site of Ansgar Cemetery and the ruins of the refectory enclosed by glass walls and protected underneath the parish house. Designed by Lundgaard and Tranberg Arkitekter with landscape architects Schönherr, the parish house playfully interprets the gable roofs of neighboring longhouse brick buildings. Rather than using standard bricks and half-round roof tiles, the designers created large handcrafted clay tiles that seamlessly clad the roof and upper exterior walls, unifying the steeply gabled form, the long side of which faces the brick facade of the south aisle of the cathedral. This sensitivity to architectural context is reflected in partner Lene Tranberg's description of the firm's approach to design. Quote, "In our practice, architecture is always about atmosphere. It's about listening to a place, finding the tone and the energy that flows through everything. That is where it begins." In addition to sheltering the excavations, the parish house contains offices and the council meeting room, which is also used for community gatherings. sometimes lectures, sometimes film nights, and musical performances. To reach the upper floors, a winding stair with solid dark red handrails coordinates with the triangular space of the meeting room held within the roof rafters, whose ceiling is also painted in the same crimson hue. Daylight illuminates this dramatic meeting room through irregularly placed skylight windows that are deeply framed by the same handcrafted clay tiles, providing effective shading from midday sunlight. From an accessible viewing platform, visitors, thank you, descend to the excavation level via two exposed steel stairs hanging from the structure above, and further expressing an atmosphere of preservation and reverence. The designer's material philosophy is one that values handcrafted, minimally processed, natural materials that retain the traces of their production. For example, each of the clay tiles bears the matrix pattern of the kiln bed, as well as unique twists and curls produced during the firing and cooling processes. This variety is further enhanced by a range of colors and surface textures. In the same vein, the exposed concrete foundation walls and columns exhibit the striations produced by their horizontal or vertical board formwork. Where these low walls surround the ruins of the refectory, the concrete resembles the horizontality of the long gray bricks of the preserved foundation walls. Another instance of such material gestures are the vertical wide wooden boards that pivot, creating more or less transparency into and shading for the excavation level. These boards have been allowed to slightly warp and twist over time. Handcrafted, curled, warped, and twisted forms and materials are characteristic of the medieval streets of Ripe. In this sense, in its interpretation of both form and materials, Cannique Garden, or the parish house, situates itself over time with its careful and creative attention to its unique context.
And now we're moving to Australia. We're going to look at Sacred Heart Building in the Abbotsford Convent in Melbourne, Victoria, by Kirsten Thompson Architects. The Abbotsford Convent was established by 4 nuns from the Order of the Good Shepherd who arrived in Melbourne in 1863 and is built on 16 acres of land in a region that had been inhabited for over 40,000 years by the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. The convent operated for over 100 years, caring for destitute girls and women, many of whom resided in the building of the Sacred Heart Building. While provided with food, shelter, and education, they had to comply with a rigorous schedule of unpaid hard labor in the adjoining commercial Magdalen laundries. Given its role in Australia's social and welfare history, the convent was placed on the National Heritage List in 2017. As expressed by the architect, quote, "The Sacred Heart Building was a key element within the grounds of the convent and arguably its symbolic heart." End quote. The introverted building with its elongated courtyard originally housed many uses of the Magdalen laundry on its ground floor. The upper floors were dedicated to the dormitory and to mending and sewing. The industrial school was on the north end where the young girls learned trade skills. Recently adapted, the Sacred Heart Building offers a mix of creative businesses, workshops, and learning spaces, as well as venues for cultural events and artisan-type retail to generate extra revenue and promote cultural activity and innovation. Due to its heritage-protected status, the building was required to be conserved throughout the restoration project. Introducing the bare minimum elements to update the building and improve accessibility, including a bridge across the courtyard, 2 elevator shafts, and new set of steel stairs, the subtle intervention employs a surgical strategy of mostly subtractive operations. The new bridge expands the circulation by connecting the east and west wings of Sacred Heart, allowing the courtyard to become a relevant part of the experience for artists and visitors above the ground plane, and offering a fine vantage point for speeches and performances. Elements removed left marks that remained exposed like scars, continuing to hold memories in the present. When new elements were introduced, the areas of the building in direct contact with them were not refinished, exposing the nature of the original building and keeping a historical record of the new intervention. All additions employed galvanized steel, clearly distinguishing this latest layer of change while satisfying the desire to minimally disturb the original building. The porosity and transparency of the expanded metal decking on the new stairs and walkways allow for a continuity of shared public space on multiple levels, counterbalancing the original isolation of floors. Deep steel plate thresholds intersect the walls to frame new openings and to underline, with their thinness, the absence of wall rather than the presence of a new gate. Acknowledging and respecting its complex past of juxtaposed aid and hardship, the restoration sought to preserve the building's history as well as to honor the multiple narratives and stories within it. For example, what is now an office space may include what appears as an incongruous remnant of last century's ablution practices, such as a row of basins or a footbath, potent reminders of its former use. This project embodies the poetics of impermanence as it captures the inevitable changes brought by the aging and weathering of all things. Refined and updated, the architecture also reminds dwellers and the vast community it serves that they're not simply occupying an old structure, but rather a living work of architecture committed to preserving meaningful narratives.
We're moving to Bangladesh now. And we're going to be looking at the Beit or Roof Mosque. The essay in our book was authored by Negar Goljan, who is a Virginia Tech PhD candidate at WAC. And so I drew quite a bit of some of the content from her essay in describing this project, which was designed by Marina Tabassum's architects. The mosque is located in a fast-growing community of lower middle income families in northern Dhaka, Bangladesh. With a modest budget, the architect primarily used unfinished local Jali red brick and concrete for the building, which gave rise to its character. It fits within its context, yet stands out from its surroundings. This is also achieved by Tabassum's subtle yet intentional urban site and building design. Designed to address the hot and humid climate, the mosque is a cool and calm place of respite. An attraction for visitors, it is a de facto magnet for its local community. From the outside, we discover how Tabassum reinvented the mosque as a contemporary architecture based on its traditional Bengal design with, quote, an essence of Islam devoid of ritualistic and symbolic attributes. It appears rooted to its place, growing from the semi-open landscape divided by low brick walls and sheds, while surrounded by contemporary concrete housing blocks. It both stands out yet remains unpretentiously content, occupying this space between with a sense of gravitas and belonging, drawing the community into quiet, contemplative, and cool spaces. The mosque is set on a plinth above the street, creating a sacred plane above the city and everyday life. The plinth protects against seasonal flooding and creates public space for the city. The mosque colonnade facing the street is a liminal space between the outside and the inside as a place to sit, meet, talk, and take shelter from the heat. The site's orientation generated a 13-degree axial shift between the street and Mecca, becoming a key to its unique design. We move from the city and once in the sacred gathering space, shift to face Mecca. Yet the mosque was designed for community. Its numerous entrances from different directions from its site creates a welcoming place of worship and a social and communal gathering space made comfortable by constant air movement through the bricks breathing, allowing air to infiltrate and move through the building. The space is non-hierarchical, without ornament, dome, or minarets, designed to provide a space for worship, contemplation that, through its simple and elegant design, creates an atmosphere of wonder and grace. The mosque is made up of 3 volumes that create a layered sequence of spaces into the prayer hall, a brick outer square, parallel to the road into which the brick cylindrical volume nests, and the concrete prayer hall. The interaction between the outer square and the cylinder creates 4 light courts: the colonnade, entrance halls, ablution, light well, and other interstitial spaces between the outer square and the cylinder. Traditional brick construction created the porous brick facade that wraps the prayer hall, providing ventilation to the interior. The concrete prayer hall, an open pavilion supported by 8 columns, is nested into the cylinder, shifting its axis of the square towards Mecca at the mihrab. Light remains at the core of the design. The vertical slit in the outer brick wall locates the Qibla, the direction of Mecca. Its bright light is visible through the prayer hall. It filters through the bricks and from the roof projects star-like pinpricks of light onto the reflective floor of the mosque, implying a sky above and beyond. The materials, brick, light, and air, are the materials that define this sacred, spiritual space through an emotive language of architecture created by Tabassum in her pursuit for innovative and contemplative atmospheres filled with flowing air and changing light. As architect Louis Kahn wrote, quote, "Light is material life. At the threshold, the crossing of silence and light, lies the sanctuary of art, the only language of man. It is the treasury of the shadows. Whatever is made of lights, casts a shadow. Our work is of shadow. It belongs in light." And now to Tokyo. Located in Sumida Ward, Tokyo, an area rooted in traditional crafts, the Sumida Hokusai Museum was designed to allow people to interact and become knowledgeable of local culture. Set near a small park in Ryugoku, the birthplace of renowned artist Hokusai Katsushika, a master of graphic art in the Edo period, the museum was designed to house and exhibit the work of Hokusai and his disciples. The building was designed within a complex urban fabric bounded by train tracks, a main road, a children's park, and mixed-use buildings. Its modern identity and volume, contrasting with traditional historic wood architecture, maintains a silent expression and familiarity with the quiet yet dense urban atmosphere of the town, park, and buildings. A monolithic mass with slit openings, at times the museum appears almost transparent due to its exterior tilted matte wall surfaces that vaguely reflect the surroundings while blending into the sky. Sejima, who was the architect, her contextual approach tempers geometric, volumetric, and spatial arrangements with its various programs while maintaining a relationship between the inside and the outside, the museum and the city. The building includes small volumes that join to form a single unified open space, separated by slits between these volumes to reduce the overall size and mass. The exterior skin is made up of 247 rectangular and polygon aluminum panels, each panel etched and then electro-polished with silver aluminite, and then precisely joined, tilting either inward or outward over the entire building. Sejima's design recalls Hokusai's unique geometric-based work and his combination of various perspectives within a single work. The museum's tilted exterior walls gather and reveal unique, shimmering reflections of the surrounding park, buildings, and sky. The museum is organized vertically through programmatic volumes whose spaces merge and shift, forming its prismatic and segmented exterior walls. With no discernible entry, one enters the ground floor, divided into 4 spaces, through an exterior passage. Neighborhood commuters and visitors can pass by these 4 public spaces, surrounded by glass and directly connected to the outside. This allows them to cut through the building mass and out the other side, or directly into the museum. Upon entering the museum, one finds the reception space, library, lecture hall, and circulation core, which links the upper floors of exhibition spaces. Most walls are slightly tilted, creating comfortable and quiet spaces filled with bright and soft light from the exterior slit windows, creating free movement, a comfortable atmosphere with contrast between brightness and darkness, closure and release. Sorry, gotta get this. The public space in the Hokusai Museum creates intermediate spaces between and within the city's social domain. We look out from the museum to see everyday life occurring around us, all framed by the museum's openings and passages. This establishes a mirror image where the inner and outer spaces penetrate, between fragmented viewpoints at various angles, the movements of society and people appearing and disappearing. The museum's public spaces are decentralized, without logical integration, ultimately conceived from the perspective of pedestrians, but designed by the architect. These shared intermediate regions create an ambiguous sense of distance, reflecting specific features of urbanity in modern Tokyo, remaining quietly from Japan's past. The absence of a centralized and unified public space reveals a Japanese sense of distance, adapting to the surroundings while hiding one's ego and existence. This reflects a unique sensibility through careful craftsmanship of the aluminum surface texture, wall surface details, and subtle blending of the cladding, corresponding to Hokusai's geometry as a new expression of public architecture in Japan.
Okay, so we went around the world in 50 minutes. Hope you enjoyed that. Before you all ran out of the room, a few comments. We will be, the book expands. Obviously, the book has 40 projects. We have shown only 9. Thanks to the generosity of the College of Architecture, Arts, and Design, we will have a book signing in the lobby of in the Kogel Hall following this talk. You have seen that the price for the book is $45. You can purchase cash, check, and or Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E, or Zelly. If you don't have the Zelle or the app, you can go ahead and download it on your way to Kogel so that by the time you get there, you can, boom, purchase. So we'll meet you. If you don't have any questions, we're happy to address questions. Sharon is running down the stairs.
There are two reasons. One, I will run the microphone. I'll get my exercise today instead of making Malachi do it, and I can bring the microphone to people with questions. Also, is not one of the projects or architects featured in the book coming here next week?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I forgot. So next Wednesday evening, the Mexican architect Tatiana Bilbao is going to be here giving an evening lecture. One of the chapters in the book is about one of her projects, the botanical gardens in Sinaloa. And she will be great, so don't miss that lecture either.
And there might be some books there too.
And there might be some books there too.
And she'll sign.
That she may sign because her project is in the book. Anything else?
Questions? So questions? I'm going to start because I have a question. How did you pick the projects in the book?
That is the hardest question.
Okay, I'll let you use that and I'll take this road.
You want to?
Well, the three of us initially decided just to look for amazing projects, and we ended up with hundreds and hundreds of amazing projects. Our book is intended to focus on the work and not focus on the woman that was a part of a team behind the work. So we investigated hundreds of projects and went through a very fun but painful process of limiting it down. The other part of the book that was really important to us was to have a global distribution of the work. And to have many different types of practices and different types of work represented in the book to dispel any stereotypes about the types of work that women do. And so we were really looking for projects across the globe and creating sort of a limitation on ourselves in that sense. There are so many more projects that we wish we could have included. And I think Marcia is going to say something about that.
Maybe in a second volume, third and fourth.
We also chose books that we really wanted to write about. So yeah, projects that we really wanted to write about, and somehow they spoke to us personally as architects and as educators. So we didn't just choose something because it's by a woman and it's really kind of an interesting and unique project. And by the way, it's famous. We weren't looking to find projects by architects that are already known. We were just trying to find projects that we really found compelling ourselves. We also just wanted to look at projects at a variety of scales too, as Jodi said, because it wasn't part of our interest in saying we're just going to look at skyscrapers or museums or anything like. We wanted to have a really large kind of scale and type that you could look at. So that's and we also wanted to make a connection with the architects themselves as much as we could. So some architects we just couldn't get in touch with to talk to them about their work. We unfortunately couldn't visit because they were all over the world.
And it was COVID.
And it was COVID.
And it was COVID, so it was very difficult to travel and to meet with the architects or even find them in their offices because for many months they were not going to the office either. So that extended a little bit the project. But it was basically the idea of trying to show the really multiple, diverse ways in which women participate in practice. So trying really to dispel all stereotypes, including types. So usually we think women focus more on interiors or on residential architecture, and we intentionally selected projects that would cover a very wide range of scales and types and material technologies and site locations and all sorts of, as diverse as possible.
Yeah, I have another comment. These projects are mostly looking at projects that are somewhat in a city. We have a lot of other projects that are not in a variety of locations. There's also a, oh, careful.
I have two questions. One, I'm curious about the way, when you spoke to the architects, the way that they view their work and their role in the practice as women. And then two, is it possible to have the index of the rest of the projects that you found?
That we could try. we do have a large file of we do have all the projects that or the projects that we weren't able to write about. Yeah. What was the other question? So we contact the architects and we actually put together a list of questions that we knew we needed information about. But then there was a section of asking them to talk about the way their practice worked, who they were, what they thought about the work, and how the project evolved. And we got a lot of really interesting answers. And we also asked them for photographs and drawings, but we wanted a lot of sketches. So we wanted to see how the projects developed. So some architects sent us photographs of a lot of models, others of sort of sketches, process drawings. Some of them just didn't. Some of us just had the PR person send us stuff. We tried to follow up, and we did get some good responses as well.
And there was the responses were obviously all different, but it was interesting to see how many of these projects had already been written about in, published in whatever, Arc Daily or The Scene or others. And so there's a way in which the information is distilled in order to fit that and the kinds of images and drawings that they provide for that. And it was really nice because we had intentionally asked for miscellaneous material. And so there's a project, for example, in Chile, in the very southern tip of Patagonia in Chile. And the architect, Jesus Eggers, sent a lot of scans of her sketchbooks. She sketches a lot. So the way that she started the project was by hiking the region, which is very remote, for I don't know how long, with the people in the office that were hiking and camping, and she was sketching and watercoloring things. And I learned a lot more, understood a lot more about that project from looking at her sketches and her little annotations and some of her watercolors than by reading the technical information and typical information that's published. So it was a really nice experience.
You said that the book focuses mostly on the projects and the work themselves. Does it go into any detail about the role of the designers in their firm?
At the end of the book, after all the projects, there's a the index of architects, and so there's a short bio of who they are, when they started, where they got educated, who they work with, and you can get a sense there of what their practice is. It's not exhaustive, but it's a little brief.
It's a really good question because we started out with one thought, which is to find these projects and just talk about the projects. But then we really started, in doing the book and doing the research, we discovered this question about multiple practices, which we did not address enough. We talked about it in the beginning, but it's another topic that we'd like to look at in some detail, because I think it's really important to understand. But this book does not have enough of that. Just to be honest about that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Marcia wants to talk about
By the way, thank you for keeping those sheets. I don't know what
I don't
happened
know
to
what
mine.
happened with mine either. They were all of a sudden like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What happened with the microphone? Is it off?
I think that